Well, hello and welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Dr. Childress. Today I'm going to be discussing assessing parenting. This is a vital area in court-involved custody conflict because there's allegations of problematic parenting from both parents. Excuse me. So the question for the psychologist is how do we assess and identify normal range parenting and problematic parenting? And particularly with this pathology that's potential factitious disorder imposed on the child and a delusional thought disorder, those are both rule out diagnoses because there's no there. For a factitious disorder, there's not a real pathology there, like ADHD or autism or any of the other eating disorders or something where we're assessing a real thing. Here we're assessing the absence of a thing, the absence of a real pathology. Same with a delusion. Delusion is a false belief system. So it becomes very important to be able to verify and document normal range parenting that cannot be producing the child's symptoms. As soon as we do that, then we can make the factitious disorder, the delusional thought disorder, and things like that. So the diagnostic process is actually a diagnosis by rule out, which requires a good and accurate assessment of parenting. So let's talk about how we do that in psychology. How do we assess for parenting? And I've done this a lot. I mean, this is my life. I'm a child and family therapist. I've worked projects, and we assess for parenting. And basically, just I'll talk about this in other places, but there's basically two main groups of parenting strategies. One are guidance-based strategies. Those are used mostly in early childhood. However, they're really wonderful throughout all of childhood. We should be using a lot more guidance-based strategies, and so that's what I tend to emphasize in my work. And then we have the discipline strategies, mostly coming out of behavioral psychology and B.F. Skinner, rewards and punishments kind of thing. And there's various cues where you transitional warnings would be like a cue intervention, those sorts of things. But mostly the behavioral interventions focus on the consequences, rewards, and punishments. Um, and uh, and so the types of rewards that are typically used in parenting are labeled praise. Oh, I like the way you picked up your room and that sort of thing. And token economies or star charts give, setting up a little reward system where the child does their chores and they earn various privileges and stuff. So there's ways of going about increasing rewards or using those to increase positive behavior. And then the second strategies are the punishment strategies that are designed to decrease problem behavior and basically involve inducing suffering in some form in the child. And one most common one is response cost, and that's taking things away from the child. So taking away toys, privileges, all those things. There's a cost to their response, their problematic response. So taking things away, response cost. That's highly problematic. It creates all sorts of side effects, but it's commonly used. Second commonly used punishment is timeout. That's putting a child in a chair or sending them to their room or various ways of socially isolating the child. That's also got various bad side effects. And, there's all punishments have very bad side effects, and I do not recommend them. I recommend guidance based strategies, but um, we'll talk about that elsewhere. And then there's the physical punishments like spanking and, stress positions or those sorts of things. All punishments, again, have problems. But basically, those are your strategies. Either you're going to go guidance or discipline. Guidance strategies um, seek cooperation, and whereas discipline strategies seek obedience. And so they have two sort of different goals on this. And guidance strategies are much better. Discipline strategies are more efficient, quicker kind of stuff, take less involvement right up front. Um, and so that's what we're basically looking at when looking at parenting, what strategies a parent's doing. And the way we assess for that is called something called an applied behavioral analysis. It's basic, basic, basic behavior therapy. Okay, so B.F. Skinner, behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, the behavior therapy. This is it. It's applied behavioral analysis. This is what's used with the kids with autism. It's used in our school system. It's used a lot of places because it's scientifically grounded. This is applied behavioral analysis, behavior therapy. Um, and basically, it's built on a structure, and you see that ABC there. That stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. And so you see ABC. The antecedent, ante means before, cedent means the event. So it's what happened before the event, also called a cue or a trigger. So what triggered the behavior? Then we have the behavioral response to the cue, followed by the consequence, the reward or punishment. And that's the basic unit of applied behavioral analysis. So what we're going to go through and do an interview with people involved, the child, the parent, and people, to identify what was the antecedent, what was the cue, what was the behavior, and what was the consequence, ABC. And then we're going to string these, that's called a behavior chain. We're going to string, or the link, and we're going to string these links together to create the whole behavior chain of what took place. So the first, let's say the parent or the child presents a behavior. That's your first day. The child, you tell the child to get off the computer because it's time to come to dinner. The child refuses to get off the computer. The child's refusal is that first A. That's the antecedent event. The behavior is the parent's response. Okay, so stimulus, response, the behavior. The consequence is what happens, reward, punishment, whatever happens as a consequence of that. Now, that consequence that happens off of that link becomes the next cue or antecedent for the child's response. So the first line is the parent's response. The second line is the child's response. So the consequence of the parent becomes the antecedent for the child, the cue for the child. The child then responds to the parent's behavior, and there's a consequence from that. The consequence becomes the cue for the parent who responds to the child. And so step by step, the psychologist, the mental health person, walks the people through this chain of events, understanding what happened. And that, I see this happen so often in the forensic psychologists and just poor mental health people. The child says, I had a conflict with my parent. And they go, okay. And they just move on. No. Stop and work it through. So what happened? What did you do? What did they say? Now, and then what did you say in response? And what did they say? And so you do an applied behavioral analysis of that conflict situation. They never do. And it just drives me crazy how bad the professional services are over here. So, because this is just basic behavior therapy we're talking about. You get this probably as an undergrad in your freshman or sophomore year as an undergrad in psychology. You'll be taught this. And so if you got the doctorate degree who doesn't know how to do an undergraduate freshman or sophomore kind of behavior therapy, that's appalling. But what you do is as you're walking them through with the people, you want them to identify what they were thinking, feeling, and doing. 3 parts. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you doing? And so you start before the event. The child says, well, there was this event, something bad happened. They didn't take me to McDonald's and I was hungry. So you say, okay, before that happened, where were you guys? Where were you? Where was the parent? So you start before the event because you want to get what the trigger was, the cue for this event. So you start where before the event, the sedent happened. And then you ask specifically, where were you? Were you in the living room? Where was your mom? Was she in the kitchen? Then she walked in. What was the thing she said to you? What did she say specifically? So she told you to get off the computer? So you get very specific, and that helps recall. And that's why you do it. So you try to identify all the cues that you can around the room. Where were you? What was being said? Where were the other people in the household? All that will help establish memory. You will help cue the memories for what took place. And it's helpful if you have both people there so they can kind of verify what the other one is reporting. But it doesn't need to be. And you don't get locked up into what the truth is. Each person has their perception. You're moving through. You're looking for what cued the situation. So it could be cognitive distortions by one person or the other, their belief system. You're not worried about changing any of that, just understanding it. So you're working it through to understand what was the cue that produced the behavior that then cued the second behavior to understand how it got escalated. So, classically, it's just then what did you do? And then what did they do? So they walked in. What did they say? And then how did you respond to that? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? And then what did you do? And then what did they do in response to you? And you just work it right on through. That's your behavior chain. Now, this whole behavioral psychology is based on B.F. Skinner in the 1940s, that little Skinner box you see with the little rat pressing the lever. And so this is like as foundational as it gets in professional psychology, applied behavioral analysis, stimulus response. And this becomes very, very important in the family courts because it makes things so easy to identify what's going on. If we apply behavioral psychology, stimulus response, because it's a factitious disorder. It's a false disorder. This whole situation, the applied, will not find anything. And then you go, whoa, there's nothing there because it's a factitious disorder. It's a delusion. So we have the stimulus called the cue or the trigger and the response, the behavior. And so up there in that little Skinner box thing, there's a little light you can up there above the rats and a little sound thing. Those are the cues. Okay, the rat sees the light. The rat presses the lever. That's the response. That's the behavior. And then you gets a little food pellet. That's the consequences. The cue, the light, the behavior. Press the lever. Consequence. You get a food pellet. So it's pretty basic stuff. Now, what we're looking at is called the cue structure. We're looking at the cue structure that elicits the behavior. What's cueing the behavior? Because, and this is, let me call it up, because we're going to intervene on that cue. Behavior is controlled by the cue, not the consequence. If you look at that sequence, you'll notice the consequence follows after the behavior. So the consequence, the reward or punishment, can never trigger a behavior, can never cue because it's not occurring before the behavior. We want to stop the behavior. We want to get ahead of it. We want to change the cue that elicits it, the behavior. Okay, and then we get rid of the behavior because there's no cue and poof, it just disappears. We don't have to worry about punishing it or rewarding it. It just disappears because we got rid of the cue that's eliciting it. The second thing we can do is we can intervene directly on the behavior. So we get the cue, but instead of it triggering behavior A, we get it to trigger behavior B. We substitute a different behavior in there. So we got two interventions we have before we ever get to the rewards or punishment side of things, the consequences. So we're trying to identify what is the cue that's triggering the behavior so we can change the cue or change the behavior to that cue. So that's the whole point. We're trying to understand that link between the A, because when we change the cue, we will change the behavior in that behavior sequence. Now, the interesting part is if we change the cue, but there is no change in the behavior, then it's not an authentic interaction. There's no stimulus response. The stimulus is not producing the response. That the cue for the child's behavior is coming somewhere other than the targeted parent. Let me explain how we explain this, and when we teach students in freshman and sophomore, undergrads, about cues and stimulus control. Driving behavior is controlled by the traffic light, not by accidents. Okay. The behavior is controlled by the cue, not the consequence. So when we come up to an intersection, we don't start to go, oh, what do I do? Is there going to be a traffic accident? We look at the traffic light. We look for the cue. If it's red, we stop. If it's green, we go. Yellow's a transitional warning. The cue is controlling our driving behavior. If we change the light from green to red, we stop. If we change the red to green, we go. Our behavior is under the stimulus control of the traffic lights. If, however, our behavior is not under the stimulus control of the traffic lights, then we can change the light to red, green, blue, magenta. It doesn't matter what color we change the light. You're going to drive right through it anyway because you're not being controlled by the stimulus of the traffic light. Your behavior is not under the stimulus control of the traffic light. So here in the family courts, our worry about authentic or inauthentic conflict is the child's behavior under the stimulus control of the targeted parent, or is it being cued and reinforced by the allied parent? So, easy peasy, change the behavior, the cue of the targeted parent. You will then see a corresponding change in the child's behavior. Change the traffic light, you will see a change in the driving behavior. If it's authentic. If it's not authentic, you will change the behavior of the parent to red, blue, green, magenta, and it will not matter. The child's behavior will not change in response to the changed parent behavior because the child's behavior is not under the stimulus control of the parent. Okay, it's under the cue is coming from somewhere else. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for what is cueing the child's behavior. Is an authentic cue, or is it not being cued by that? Is it coming from somewhere else? Now, I want to take a little sidestep because this is also a response to intervention assessment that I just described there. So if we're doing an assessment of the family situation and we want to see if it's authentic, we can do an intervention on it. We can assume it's an authentic intervention, authentic conflict. So the child is responding to the parent, and we assume that's authentic. Okay, we change the parent. We should see a change in the child. That's response to intervention. If we don't see a change in the child, then it's not being triggered. Boop, 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 and we identify where it's being triggered, the alliance with the other parent, the cues coming from the other parent. So that's called a response to intervention, but that's on the treatment side of things. The other thing we can do, if we can look at this, is a little bit of expansion. It's called a functional behavioral analysis. That's where we add A, B, C, F, and that's antecedent, behavior, consequence, and the function that the behavior serves. And that will get into the factitious disorder and secondary gain. However, in the family courts, your psychology people are so bad, they don't even know applied behavioral analysis. So functional behavioral analysis is just beyond them at this point. Now, mind you, a functional behavioral analysis is mandated by the Individuals with Disabilities Act for all kids in the school district before schools can put in a behavior program. So for schools to do a behavior program with a child, their school psychologist has to do a functional behavioral analysis. So you in the family courts are getting mental health services below what you get in just your common school system out there. Okay, you're the courts, with the massive importance of the court's decision, is getting lower quality of services than the public school system is. Just because you're lazy. These are psychologists, and they're just lazy and don't do applied behavioral analysis on stuff. It's just appalling. So, authentic, here it is. You want me to draw you a picture? Here it is. Authentic interaction is going to be under the stimulus control of the parent. So if we change the parent, we'll see a change in the behavior. Inauthentic interaction is not under the stimulus control of the targeted parent. So if we change that parent's behavior, you will see no change in the child's behavior because it's being cued from some other location. I wonder where. So this is what a classic piece of paper is going to look like for the psychology person. This is how we do it. You'll have a chart like this, and across the top, you'll have before, during, and after the conflict event or the event, the situation, and the thinking, feeling, and doing. Then as we are interviewing, we'll have this little chart, flow chart in our lap. And as we go, okay, what before, we'll start indicating what were they thinking, doing before the event happened, what were they doing during the event, and what happened after the event. And in that way, we will establish the cue structure and the behavior change sequence for things. It's just like standard stuff. Okay. We got form sort. And identifying the parenting is easy. That's just a checklist. I mean, so you can go through and dialogue and negotiation, label, praise, star chart, response cost, timeout, physical discipline, anger, moral instruction, using shame and guilt. So you can identify all the different strategies they use. That's easy peasy. Check, check, check. And if there's a problem, you change the strategy, you change things. Okay. We always fix things. Okay. We always land on treatment. People in the family courts are worried about the child's best interests. You'll hear that a lot. Best interests of the child, best interest. It is always in the child's best interest to fix the problem in the family. If there's breached attachment bonds, it's always in the child's best interest to fix the attachment bonds in the family. It's always in the child's best interest to receive love from both parents. Okay, that's always so let's do that. Let's fix whatever the problem is. First step, let's identify, diagnose what the problem is. And it's easy peasy. You just go through it and figure out what's causing the situation. Lots of ways to do that. And once you do that, then you put a treatment plan to fix it. But if you wind up treating cancer with insulin, your patient's going to die from the misdiagnosed cancer. So you need an accurate diagnosis as to which parent is abusing the child. And one parent or the other is abusing the child if you have severe attachment pathology, a child rejecting a parent. So finally, sort of in addition to all of this, I have for you, because I know parenting, I know all this, I know the question the court needs. So I've developed for you, the parenting practices rating scale, little simple checklist, check, 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 check. And it goes very specifically into the types of parenting that can be involved. But it's actually, as an instrument, it collapses. So what I did is I asked the mental health person to identify specifically the type of parenting across 4 domains of severity. So is a parent over involved? Are they under involved? Are they too angry? Are they, what's going on? And there are about 6 choices under each level of what to do. But then what we're going to do is we're going to collapse that into just the level, because we don't really care specifically what they're doing. We just want the level. Are they level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? And then, because level 1 and level 2 are child abuse or severely problematic. Okay, if a parent is determined to be level 1 or level 2 based on applied behavioral analysis and talking to everybody and figuring things out, and you say, whoa, this is child abuse rage parenting or severely problematic, just under child abuse, then that becomes the focus of the treatment plan. I don't care what the other parent's doing. If I've got a level 1 or 2 parent, I need to be focused on that, bring that down. And once I get them into normal range, 3 or 4, then I can focus on what the other parent's doing if there's a problem. But that will always take precedence on the treatment plan, level 1 or 2. Level 3 and 4, though, are normal range parents. So level 3 is just like normal range. There's problems, but that's a normal range problem. No parent is perfect. And we like problems, actually. We like conflict. Well, there we go. Power of discord, Research, Edtronic. Only 30% of healthy parent-child relationships are synchronous. 70%, they're out of sync. They're in mismatched relationships. There's conflict in 70% of the time in healthy relationships. Conflict is not a bad thing. It's fixing it. It's the repair that's important. Breach and repair. We always repair. That's incredibly important for brain development, for social development, for a lot of things. Breach and repair. We always repair. It's not the breach that's a problem. It's the repair. And so level 3 parenting, no problem on that. A little bumpy, something we put on a treatment plan, we fix it, no problem. Then level 4 is your healthy, normal range, parent. They use discipline, guidance, but there's normal, healthy range parent. And so those are your 4 categories. Now, we are also going to, though, collapse those categories, because the only thing I care about on diagnosis here is whether the targeted parent is abusive or normal range, because that's going to be on my differential diagnosis. A delusional thought disorder is a false attack, is a false belief system. It's a delusion. So if this parent and child are alleging that the targeted parent is abusive somehow, I have to determine if that's true or false. So that's what this helps document, is my determination of whether this belief is true or false. And then once I document, people can argue with me and take it and say, no, I don't agree with that. And I'll come up with my examples that I will produce from my interview that is the reason I put it in that category. So I will give you examples that I have from my interview as to why I rated it in that category. And then, but we can talk about it and we can fix it and do things with it. But this provides clarity. So I need to determine if this parent, the targeted parent, is abusive or not. So what I need to come back on, my decision, is whether they are level 1 or 2, abusive range, or level 3 and 4, normal range. That's all I care about, abusive range or normal range. And what collapsing does on that, it's a psychometric procedure of constructing test instruments. It improves the reliability of the ratings. So if I take it very specific, then I collapse it into a more general category, and then I collapse it again into a more general category. That more general category is accurate. The other ones may be a little fuzzy and stuff, but by the time you brought it up, I'm going to have either they're abusive or normal range, and it'll be clear. And if they're a normal range, then they cannot be causing the severe attachment pathology. We got the rule out, and now we got the factitious disorder, because they can't be causing it. There's a false disorder. They're not causing the pathology. So that's how your diagnosis of the fact of applied behavioral analysis. And if you just rate the targeted parent, that ends a lot of the controversy and fighting around this parent that goes on for years. Is there abusive? Well, get a rating from your mental health people. And if you want to challenge it, but then we get examples and get clarity. This pathology is disorganized. It creates chaos. It creates confusion. We need clarity. Diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting, parenting practices rating scale for the targeted parent. You do those 2 checklists, check on the symptoms, you will diagnose this pathology 100% of the time. Just do it. Don't believe me, just do it. Just check, easy peasy. You don't even have to agree with me. Mental health people, just check. Give us the data and see what happens if you use a diagnostic checklist and the parenting practices rating scale. Try it. Just see what will happen, because you'll solve it if you do that. I guarantee it. I'm telling you what to do. So with that, that is basically how to assess for parenting. Now, I'll talk more about that over the course of time, the different parentings, things we do, and how they affect children, and the qualities of things we can do on that, and how to assess parenting on a number of levels and what we're looking for. So I can talk about all that elsewhere, but it's really actually pretty simple. Applied behavioral analysis, you look at the you know, ABC, antecedent behavior consequence, identify the cue structures, is authentic or inauthentic. Is it under the stimulus control? If you have a question, response to intervention, you change the parent's behavior. If it changes, yes, that's authentic. If it doesn't change, then it's not under the stimulus control. It's not authentic. There's a cue coming from somewhere else. Then the contingent visitation schedule is designed to address some of that. When it's not the targeted parent who's cueing the behavior, it's the other parent creating a fact issue, then we go into a treatment plan for that, the contingent visitation schedule. So with that, I'm going to head off to my Sunday. Good luck to everybody out there. And I'm sorry you got such low quality mental health services in the family courts. We'll see what we can do about getting you basic competence for your children and for the courts. So with that, I'm going to head to my Sunday, everybody. So take care.